I believe from the beginning we identified who we wanted to serve. We identified their pain points, and we focused on providing them solutions to those problems. Essentially, we focused on consumers, unlike other brands that will focus on customers. Now, I would like to differentiate that the customers primarily for a manufacturing company will be the channel partners, the distributors. Then you would now have the end users, who you would call the consumers. But we wanted to deal directly with the consumers, engage the consumers, find out what the problems are. So that consumer engagement has really helped us. What is quite interesting is, you find in business, sometimes you know what you want to do. Somewhere down the road, things change. As you meet challenges, you begin to refine how you achieve your objectives, because of some of the resistance we had from channel partners. That even motivated us more to bypass them and deal with the consumers. And dealing with the consumers has made us to understand them very well, to engage them, to build a sort of community. Just talking about community, very early, from 1997, even before people started talking about online community, we're already doing that offline. We went from school to school, we went from hostel to hostel, we went from door to door knocking, engaging students. So we first of all built that community, because we realized that they were influencing not only their peers, they were also influencing their younger ones and their older ones. So we built that community. So in summary, we identified problems. We've consistently focused on solving those problems. We've been fiercely loyal to our consumers. Now, I'm not talking about customers, consumers. We recognize that. We've been fiercely loyal to them. We've been engaging them. And finally, and very importantly, even though I'm now revealing our strategy, knowledge sharing. From day one, we'll be very strong and consistent with knowledge sharing. We share information, we educate people, we educate prospective consumers. We share problems with them, we understand their problems, we tell them possible solutions. But what's interesting is that we don't impose those solutions on you. If you like, you choose us. If you're happy with what we offer, you can also choose somebody else. But what is important is that we're empowering you with knowledge. And we've continued to do that. And I think, over the years, people have recognized that and stayed with Nature's Gentle Touch. From day one, we wanted to build a brand, not make a product. Wouldn't say money wasn't important, but we knew if we built a brand, if we knew that if we built a system, then it would be a lot easier to create wealth out of that. It would be a lot easier to find sustainability. So from the beginning, we wanted to do a long distance race, not not a sprint. We realized how the market was and wanted to change the narrative, wanted to change the conversation. And again, then we were literally the only local company. And, we didn't have all the advantages of the multinational companies. We didn't have the advantages of the foreign imported, products. So we needed to create our own pathway and take a long-term perspective. Otherwise, it would have squashed us. When we started making relaxers, we were trying to solve a problem, and basically we've remained a solution brand, solving problems. And how we do that, where we say solution is, we'll first share knowledge with you, and we'll identify what the problem is, and we'll give you some brand experience and the product, itself. So we'll be recognized for that. You find that in business, you find a problem, or sometimes the problem finds you. Sometimes a trend also would find you. At that point, we realized that there was going to be a cultural shift, and people were beginning to ask themselves questions, who who were there and what was it that was going to express who they were, their identity, their individuality, their personal style, and their origin as well. And we also found out that there was a market that nobody was really bothering to provide solutions to. If I use a sect in Christianity, Deeper Life, for example, and you would see them, they wouldn't apply chemicals to their hair. They were just not the only ones. There were so many people too, even mothers, who didn't want to. And there were also young people who also didn't want to apply chemicals to their hair until they got to a certain age. And schools also didn't even allow that. Some schools, particularly secondary school. So all those things came together, and clearly there was a need, to provide solutions to the challenges this segment, of the community or the population or the market, wanted. And we saw that opportunity, and we decided to go after that. Again, if we're talking about our values, if you've ever started explaining our values to you, you would find that differentiation is a key part of our DNA, who we are. Also being fresh, being sassy. So we're always looking for what problem are we going to solve, how are we going to be different, what trend are we going to set, that will be different. We're competing with foreign products that were just bringing in relaxers as well and dumping into the market. So we needed to create another segment, so that was how we started championing this. And one of the ways we started was by knowledge sharing. We started educating people, about it. Then the thing gained momentum, and suddenly, even from the US, there was also a growing a growing perception for people to express who they are with their hair, and natural hair just came in handy, and the things that are happening. From the onset, we realized that hair is a key element of, was and still is, a key element of somebody's personality or identity. I mean, your hair would easily tell the type of person, that you are. So when we recognize that it was a key part of it, that it just wasn't an accessory. So we made that a focal point of what we produce. Again, personal style also helped us to differentiate ourselves from competition. Earlier I talked about products that were being imported. Reality was that the products were actually not made for us. And we're different. If you look at the Lagos vibe, if you look at Nigerian vibe, if you look at our our attitude, our personality, the entire persona of who we are, how we express ourselves, how we do our things, how we carry ourselves. Younger people talk about our swagger. The hair is part of it. We wanted to project that, to say, like, look, this is who I am. I can use it to express my unique sense of individuality, my unique sense of style, of my personal style. So we realized that and made it a core of first of our identity and what we project. So everything we do, solutions we provide, because we give you education, we'll tell you how the hair affects what you project, and what you're projecting is your style. So that is how the thing fits in. That was how it fitted in. That is how it fits in today, and will consistently continue, to represent ourselves as not only a personal style brand, but a personal style company. Even in terms of strategies, it's always been about differentiation. What can we two different, so that when we get into this space, we'll be remembered. When we walk into a crowded room, which is what the marketplace is, because there are thousands of brands, it will be more memorable. We also realize that this business is about two things. One, performance, product performance, and image. So we needed to do things that would, make some statement. At that point, those were the best people, literally. If you look at photography, for example, it wasn't that popular when we first started as it is today, where technology has also enhanced it. So we needed to find the best people. We flew in Mark from New York, to do it. Then, with Oluchi, we just needed to make a statement that would just stand us out. Besides, she was already an icon, of style. She was the first face of Africa, so it was important. And look at us, this young brand, and being that association. And interestingly, I'm very happy to say that when we spoke with Oluchi, she said this was the first product she used. So there was that connection. And from there, we had Abani Darego, who was a former Miss World. And not only there, we also had the former Miss Universe from Angola, Leila Lopez. But in summary, Nature's Gen Touch has always been associated with very beautiful women, because that is what we represent. Our name goes back to our origin, how we all started, where we saw the space in the market, where we saw the opportunity. We started because we realized that people were complaining that products they had were hurting their scalp, so it was giving them scalp irritation. So we were focused on creating a product that would be gentle to the scalp and also gentle to the hair. So in essence, it will touch the scalp gently and, and the hair gently. So that was where the name came from, first, gentle touch. In addition, we realized, particularly when I was in University of Nigeria, I studied industrial chemistry, and I had interest in the chemistry of natural products. So I already had a bit of understanding of those, natural products, and I had an interest in working with them. Even if I look at my own, family background in terms of my grandparents, what were they were doing with plants, so plant chemistry was already something I was interested in, and I was trying to see how I could commercialize that sometime in future. So doing Nature's Gentle Touch kind of accelerated it, so we experimented with shea butter. We played around with cocoa butter. We played around with palm kernel oil, and a couple of other ingredients we were finding there here. By then, the natural ingredient everybody's talking about today, people were not even talking about that on that massive scale, but we had started using them. So because we were incorporating that, we had to say nature's gentle touch. So we've consistently been using some of these ingredients to try and make our products. Because like I said earlier, we wanted to create solutions for people who were in Nigeria, not for people who were somewhere else. And again, it was also a lot accessible, it was more accessible for us. So we could use the product. We'll still use it. Another thing is the process, how, we use the product so that you have minimal interaction with synthetic chemicals. You can't do it overnight. I mean, it's a long distance, so you need systems, because you have technology today that makes it easier for you to be able to broadcast or expose yourself or your brand to so many people at the same time. It doesn't take away the place of hard work. It doesn't take away the place of persevering. It doesn't take away the place of being, persistent. It doesn't take away the place of understanding who your customer or consumer is and trying to provide, solutions. But it's also important that you build a strong system.